Hello and welcome to a new episode of the Cradle News Roundup, your one-stop shop for all news West Asia. My name is Esteban Carrillo. I am the head of news for the Cradle, and as usual, I'm joined by my colleagues, content creator and writer for the Cradle, Karim Shami, and columnist and editor for the Cradle, Sharmin Narwani. And before we start, please, as usual, we just want to remind you to share, to like, to subscribe to our channel, and to check out our Patreon, where you can become a supporter of the Cradle. And we want to thank all of those who have already become Patreon members. We want to thank you all very much. Okay, so something very interesting has been happening over the past several weeks in reality, although the reports have just started now to come out. And it's Israeli soldiers are being targeted by criminal complaints all over the world. These pro Palestinian organizations, in particular the Hind Rajab Foundation, a Belgium based NGO named after the 6-year-old Hind Rajab, who was horribly murdered in the Gaza Strip last year. They have been working with lawyers in several countries to file criminal complaints against Israeli reservists who are on leave, who are vacationing. The most recent of which, apparently, this morning in Thailand. Thai courts are now looking into an unnamed Israeli soldier there who committed war crimes in Gaza. Over the weekend, a Brazilian federal court ordered a police investigation into, again, another Israeli soldier accused of committing war crimes. Hundreds of lawyers in Chile issued a statement on Friday as well, calling for another Israeli soldier. So, according to Israeli media, this has been happening all over the place. They're talking about dozens of countries, at least 50 criminal complaints. In many cases, the soldiers have evaded investigation before it even began. The Tel Aviv has been mobilizing its resources to provide them with legal aid or just to smuggle them out of the country. This is what the words that Israeli media is using. In the case, for example, of the Brazilian investigation, the soldier fled into neighboring Argentina, and we all know that Argentina is a country that its current government stands fully in support of the genocide in Gaza. So it's very, very interesting again what is happening, because all of a sudden, Israeli soldiers cannot feel safe anywhere. And just one last thing before I let you guys go on. The evidence that is being presented comes from their own social media accounts, from their own Instagram, from their own Facebook, their own whatever platform, because these soldiers are apparently posting as many as 1 million posts a day from Gaza and from Lebanon of themselves committing war crimes. So, this is really a case of chickens coming home to roost.
I I don't know how the Israeli army has let that continue for 16 months. I mean, especially after the ICC and ICJ rulings. Um, they have to understand, I mean, these soldiers and of course it completely defeats their argument that they're the most moral army in the world. I mean, these pictures show us the absolute opposite. You'd think a professional army would, first of all, not want their troops to look unprofessional on the field. But second to that, and I think even more important is, location capabilities. These guys are taking pictures in the field showing themselves, the enemy potentially where they are. I've never understood that. And certainly after the genocide case was filed by South Africa, that would be an instant, excuse or reason to stop this activity. And truthfully, Esteban, that number you cited that the Israeli government provided, that there are 1 million such social media posts by active Israeli troops in the
Per day.
battlefield, is astounding. Per day. Like, it's counterproductive for the Israelis in every way. I have no beef with it because it's the evidence we're going to need for criminal cases and genocide cases, legal cases, etc. But why would they do this?
I think, well, I feel like the Israeli army has been acting in such a way, with such impunity for the past a year and a half, almost year and a half at this point, that this is really probably the least of their concerns at the end of the day, right? It seems like they are completely preoccupied with simply eradicating the Palestinians in Gaza, and they're providing their soldiers with every opportunity to feel good about it, right? We just reported at the Cradle a couple of weeks ago that the Israeli army built a resort for its soldiers in Gaza, in which they have everything from an espresso machine to a masseuse to video games and whatever else, just so they can unwind, right, from crushing people dead and alive all over Gaza using the excavators. So I think allowing them to post these images is just also part of this stance that Israel has taken of complete impunity, and also of celebrating what is happening in Gaza. Because remember, internally in Israel, there's hardly any opposition to what's actually happening in Gaza. You don't see anti-genocide protests in Israel. You don't see people, raising their voice. Maybe because they can't, because we know the government is persecuting anyone who expresses support for Palestinians. But I think it's been pretty much in every poll that we have seen. We have seen that support for what's happening in Gaza is pretty broad in Israel. So when you look at the social media posts, I think it just reflects where Israeli society actually stands at this.
Yeah, I mean, but I have to say the Israelis are very, very smart and they're early adapters of lawfare. They know very well, and I mean, they go into countries and try to push legislation that preempts the possibility of legislation against Israel in every which way. So this is the opposite of the kind of behaviors we've seen. I mean, I agree with you. There's some kind of crazy, demented immunity bubble that some of these people, exist in, but at least their advisors must be pushing another tune. Like, this is very, very dangerous for Israel. And now that we're seeing the lawsuits, I mean, we've been talking about this from early days after October 7th, that especially after the ICC and the genocide case was launched, that the amount of lawsuits that are going to slowly start, flooding out of this, just the ICC case, let alone the others, is going to be, enormous. It literally creates an opportunity for lawsuits the world around. And now you have, in the last 16 months, an I mean, so this lawsuit that we're talking about, the Brazilian one, was launched by something called the Hind Rajab Foundation, a Belgium-based NGO, which has filed a number of these suits. But in
Almost
other
most of them, I
cases,
think it's by them.
yeah, but that's just gonna make it easier for others to do it, But, a number of these lawsuits are being filed by consortiums of lawyers in countries, who are just regular lawyers. They're not Palestinian lawyers, they're not Arab lawyers, they're not Muslim lawyers, they're just lawyers. I mean, I know from speaking to someone who was, a key member, in the UK, of the UK's Association of Lawyers, I don't remember what the name is, they even have a stance on this. They understand that the violations are so extreme, there is going to be legislation, and they're advancing this notion. I mean, Israelis are not going to be able to travel anywhere. But here's what interests me. So the ones we covered at the Cradle, okay, the Israeli soldiers on vacation, were Israeli-based soldiers on vacation elsewhere. Let's not forget that Israel counts on hundreds of thousands of reservists, okay? Many of whom live in other countries around the world.
The many of
What?
them will return to serve after October 7th.
Correct. Can these people not return home now? I mean, does this mean that, we talked about Israel now being the least safe place for Jews in the world? Are we going to revert back to Israel being the only place where Jews are safe from lawsuits around the world?
And
And what does that do to the morale of reservists, the hundreds of thousands of reservists that Israel
yeah,
can call on from around the world, even non-citizens, right? Zionists who live in other countries. Those guys are not, they're not going to serve anymore because there'll be a lawsuit waiting for them when they get back home. If even one of these passes in like courts, an international court.
yeah, and actually, the case in Brazil is very interesting because the Hind Raja Foundation they highlighted that this is the first instance of a signatory state to the Rome Statute that is directly enforcing its provisions without relying on the ICC. So this is what happened in Brazil. What they're saying is it sets a precedent. It has finally set a precedent because it was the first time that a federal court actually ordered, this investigation. This is why the
Yeah.
soldier had to flee. Karim, I want to hear from you about what do you think? You think the Israeli soldiers are actually facing a now repercussion, or are these measures pretty toothless at the end of the day? Because we had this discussion before here on the podcast.
Yeah, first you talked about three main points. First of which is that why they allow them to post. I think the Israeli army knows what they are posting, and they know what to post and when to post. Because, for instance, there are many incidents that occurred previously, and no info or photos were released by soldiers. They were released by the Israeli army following months. For instance, what happened in Siaf, for instance, the assassination of Sinwar. We also saw the pictures after the army told them that they can release the pictures because the pictures were taken by soldiers and the videos. These are only two examples, but they are major examples. So what I think the Israelis want the soldiers to spread these videos because I think they are benefiting from the commands, and they can recruit people from the commands, because if you go to certain accounts, you will see Arabs and other people that are supporting, unfortunately, Israel, and these people can be recruited easily if they support the videos that they watch. That's what I was thinking of when you were speaking. And the second point is that will Israelis be safe outside Israel? I agree with Sharmin, but I also feel sad because I feel if these soldiers went to Sharm el-Sheikh in Egypt or Dubai in UAE, they won't face anything, and that thing make me sad. So now they have like, yani, their destinations are now maybe limited, but unfortunately, including these limited destinations are Arab countries' destinations. And also, I wanted to mention that unfortunately, also this organization based in Brussels, you said in Belgium, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, also, as an Arab, I feel sad that it's not based in an Arab country. So I just wanted to mention that. And of course, it's bad for Israel as an entity, and for the soldiers that this is happening. And I said it before, what's happening now in Israel is somehow as what happened in South Africa. Gradually, countries and organizations started to like pull back from anything from South Africa. And that's what we saw in Israel. First, we have the universities, the politicians can't go anywhere without like being confronted, and now they're soldiers, and even any organization or company that is linked to Israel, we know the boycott, it's affecting the Israelis, and it's affecting the company that might not be an Israeli company, but supports Israel. So gradually, this is what I'm witnessing.
Yeah, it's completely correct what you're saying. We have seen, companies like Starbucks, like Coca-Cola, etc., see downturn, I guess, in their business models. But now the Israeli army is apparently not just the army, like the internal security, Shin Bet. They're analyzing risks to soldiers, so they are, kind of preparing to either finally maybe make the soldiers stop posting these horrific videos on social media, or to simply give them a list of countries where they shouldn't travel, right? Like a travel advisory. One thing that comes to my mind about this whole situation is Donald Trump's arrival in a few weeks. There's been already reports that his Israel First cabinet is preparing a package of sanctions against the ICC, against ICC judges and their families as well. So I feel like at this point, if you see more countries taking up a position, like for example Brazil did, or what maybe some other nation, I think Sri Lanka also started to mobilize against these Israeli soldiers. Are under threat of sanctions now? Are we going to see nations get sanctioned because they are respecting, or they are applying the Rome Statute and the Genocide Convention?
Yeah, I think we might. We might. And first, Trump, his tweets regarding Panama and Canada tell us that he doesn't care about anything. And of course, if the matter is about Israel, he will like take actions. And of course, not only him and his cabinet, all of his cabinet is like this. But also to see the bigger picture, we all know that United States is on a downfall, if we can say. Yeah, now we have Trump. Previously, we had Biden, and before him we had Trump, and before him we had
Obama.
Obama. What happened is every single president that came canceled everything that the previous president did, and we have like I don't know, maybe 12 years of this. So the downfall of US is, and it will happen 100%. And I don't know till when the United States can support Israel. Previously, the Israelis, I think, were smarter because they created balance between the USSR and the USA. And one of them, if one fell, the other country can support Israel. But now, if the United States becomes weaker and weaker, because of course Trump will try to make many things, and the other party will do whatever they can to stop him, and this also will accelerate the downfall of the United States, or not that the downfall, it will be weaker than before, and I don't know till when they can support Israel that much. And I am convinced since I was born that if Israel wants to يعني, the entity of Israel, if it wants to persist, it should have a strong ally as the United States. And if the United States is like weaker, we don't know what will happen. So we have to wait and see.
I just want to add that, the more the US gets fast and loose with sanctions, okay, just stupid almost with sanctions, the more it incentivizes states and global institutions to, I guess, recalibrate and become less US centric, because there are other options now, right? The China, Russia, India, Indonesia, Africa, like we're seeing like the Sahel states in Africa just walk away because there's another option. Even the Saudis and the Emiratis playing with the Russians, playing with the Chinese because there are legitimate other options. So Trump can come in and say, we're going to sanction any country that does trade with China. We're going to sanction. That just pushes countries to work with the new rising powers, right? The new global powers. I'm not so worried about that. Also, getting to your point about why doesn't something like the Hind Rajab Foundation exist in Arab countries? Well, forget that. Like, I mean, we know what the problem with the Arab countries are. They don't let anything that goes against their politics survive. But what's
Was an
important
emotional
is,
comment.
what's important, I think, being based in Brussels, where the EU Parliament, the EU governance is based, is the EU has created, and probably one of the reasons that the UK walked away from the EU, it created such an entanglement of laws, regulations, restrictions, heavy on human rights. Okay, of course, European countries consistently violate these EU conventions and regulations because, as we know, they support terror organizations and regime change and et cetera, et cetera. But that is actually a great place to start filing lawsuits, because also, not just because the legal infrastructure is there, because it is Europe by and large that is, been a stalwart supporter of Israel and its many crimes. So if you start to tangle, use the EU's own regulations, filing lawsuits in multiple European jurisdictions, some of these are going to win, and it's going to have a freezing effect on business with Israel, on travel to Israel, on Israelis traveling here. So I think it is a very smart, decision to have this major NGO filing legal actions,
Yeah,
being
because
based in
for
Belgium.
instance, if a soldier went to whatever Spain, and they filed anything against him in Belgium, they are obliged to get him anywhere in Europe.
Correct,
So yeah,
correct.
and
So
most of
it's
them, يعني, most of the even Israeli army leaders, they are originally from Europe. يعني.
yeah.
They are used to go there.
Oh, I think the whole the lawsuits and the boycotts and the and sanctions, whatever, against companies dealing with Israel has barely even started. I mean, we've seen some great successes, because global populations have identified companies like McDonald's and Starbucks, et cetera, and made these companies feel the heat, with losses, right, in growth and profits. But we've yet to see this become, where legal cases being won that frees the environment, anyone working in that industry, in that vertical, et cetera. And I think there's a lot of that to come yet. And I think that's where the Israeli frog gets spoiled, because it's outside the US's jurisdiction. These are sovereign countries pursuing court cases, and it's their legitimate right to do so. The US cannot sanction every country in the world, certainly can't sanction its allies. You know, let Trump
شايفين دقيقة
let Trump sanction European countries and see what happens to the Atlanticist alliance. It falls apart. What? Because of Israel? Great. Not complaining here.
It's going to be an interesting year, that's for sure. Because I do agree with you guys that this is just going to continue to snowball. It's not gonna slow down. And it's actually, I find it a bit reassuring that it's finally happening. I don't know where it's gonna end up because the length of these legal cases. I hope that soon enough we actually see an arrest be made. That would be very interesting. That, again, like what happened in Brazil, right? It sets a precedent, then all of a sudden you start setting more and more precedents. All of a sudden, the world becomes that much smaller for the Israeli army. In any case, this is obviously a topic we're going to stay on for in the long term. But a place where Israeli soldiers, feel pretty emboldened to continue to enter is Syria, right? The south of Syria, where we have seen continued encroachment by the Israeli army, continued attacks. The Israeli army at this point controls a large portion of Syria's water sources. Last week, they took control of
In the
Almatara.
in the Quneitra countryside, which is the largest dam in southern Syria,
Almantara, yes, Almantara.
seized control of 6 of the most strategic bodies of water in the south.
Yeah, so all of a sudden, it's very interesting in a sad way, honestly, what's happening in Syria. Because on the one hand, you have the Israeli army uh, with no opposition whatsoever taking control of Syria's water sources, and they keep talking about this is only gonna be they're gonna be in there for the winter. Officially, that's what they say. While you see, all of these Israeli journalists or influencers or whatever already talking about Mount Hermon as if it's part of Israel all of a sudden. And at the same time, you have this diplomatic whirlwind happening in Damascus, in which a Western official after Western official comes in to meet with the former, founder of Al Qaeda, former protege of the founder of ISIS, Ahmad al Shara, give them their full support, give them, as much legitimacy as possible. Now we're hearing that the U.S. government today, maybe even would ease some of the restrictions on Syria. They talk about the restrictions of humanitarian aid, not so much lifting of sanctions, but loosening, I guess, the stranglehold that Syria has been under for so long. So it's what is the Syrian, this new interim government? What are they going to have to say in a few weeks, in a few days, when all of a sudden all of Syria's water sources, or maybe just their principal water resources, are completely under Zionist control. Is Israel going to start selling water to
Well,
towards
it's not just Israel that's the violator. Turkey has been the greater violator all along the Syrian conflict. Just something to note is that Israel now controls, as of December, controls 30% of Syria's water supply, but it controls 40% of Jordan's. Okay, that Israeli buffer state to the east. Because it took control, the Israeli invasion of Syria is in the south of Syria and abuts Jordan's north. And the Israelis took over the Al Wahda Dam, which is located on the Jordanian border. And, that country is the biggest beneficiary of this water supply. But we have written in 2022 and 2023 at the Cradle extensively about Turkey's water grabs. Okay, it's breaking of agreements left, right, and center with neighboring states, with Syria, with Iraq on the free flow of water. A lot of this has to do with the Euphrates River, and by doing so, by controlling the water, it has actually unleashed natural disasters along the Euphrates basin in both Syria and Iraq, leaving hundreds of thousands of inhabitants in eastern Syria without access to drinking water. This is Turkey, okay? This has been a big problem. The Iraqis have time and time again tried to address their existing water sharing treaties with Turkey, and Turkey just continues to violate these things. It's done, played some dirty tricks by redefining the Euphrates. I can't remember I think instead of classifying the Tigris and Euphrates rivers as cross-border rivers, which essentially means that international laws for the sharing of river water do not apply. So it's I mean, it literally has cut off water supplies to Iraq and Syria for a good decade and a half or more. The Turks have done huge dam building projects, aiming to construct 24 dams, power plants, etc., on the Euphrates and Tigris, and like literally restricting water, essential waters to Syria and Iraq. It's a hostile act. That the control of your rightful water supply is an act of war. Now Israel's doing it on the south. And yes, you're right. Like, what is the Syrian government going to do about this? Because the Syrian government's obviously, the jihadis in control in Damascus are very closely allied with the Turks. And the Turks are doing, everything they can to improve the lot of Syrians in the short term and medium term, so that Syrians will support their proxy government, right? So I think water is going to be an issue in which I think Ankara is going to have to loosen the taps for the
It's
Syrians.
interesting.
But
Yeah.
Israel is taking the south. Now, I personally don't think, like in Lebanon, Israel can just continue to occupy those territories unimpeded. I don't think there will be a battle to have them leave southern Syria. I think it will just be some deal making in which the Israelis will, be super, super intransigent on many points in order to gain what they really, really ultimately want. And we don't know what its goal is, right? So I think we will see Israel move out of a lot of the territories they've occupied in southern Syria, but they will never leave without gaining some strategic assets there.
What's your take, Karim? What's your take about this situation with the water?
Well, it's still fresh and it's complicated. I think like an Israeli, they might push some jihadists to make atrocities against the Druze because south of Syria are all Druze, and then they will push them because we heard already some Druze they are saying we prefer to live under Israeli control rather than living under jihadist control. So they might do something, and they will say, "Oh, we are here to protect these minorities." And we know there's a very big Druze community in Israel, and they are in highest levels in the country. We might see this, or nobody will talk about it because if the Syrian government didn't talk about it, who will talk? Why there will be action? Yani, first, if we want to see steps of actions, the new Syrian government must file a complaint in the UN. I don't think they will ever do that. So they are
Against
just
Israel.
happy
My
that they
God.
took Damascus and now Bashar al-Assad is not in Syria. And they don't care about anything because these people, they don't have loyalty to Syria. They have loyalty to Turkey. And they don't care. They don't care about Hasaka. They don't care about what's happening in the south. They just want Damascus and Aleppo. And I think if they only take
And the
control of these two
resources.
cities, they don't
Yeah.
care.
I mean, right now, what's
These people
interesting,
didn't come.
No,
Yes,
no, go ahead. Sorry, sorry. I don't mean to cut you
these
off.
people didn't come to liberate Syria as they said, because now Syria is more occupied than ever, and they didn't even fight in words. So I don't expect anything from them. And unfortunately, we have to wait and see what will happen. Yeah, and maybe they will make a deal on behalf of Arabs, as every country does. But currently, I don't think there's anything that can push Israel outside of Syria, unless if they see that the areas that they control they don't want, they will retreat. But of course, they took the highest mountain in Syria, in southern Syria. I don't think they will retreat from there. And of course, they will keep some bodies of waters because we know that in Israel they lack water, and that's why they invaded South Lebanon in the first place in the 70s and in the 80s. If they can take water from Syria, why they should care to negotiate anybody? And moreover, they are waiting for Trump to give them more legitimacy over West Bank and Julan before this happens. So unfortunately, I don't think anything will change, at least in the near future. And now, who is backing Syria is Turkey. And we know Turkey, it's all talks and there's no actions, or they talk and they do, their actions are opposite of what they talk. So we have to wait and see.
So what I wanted to say was just that, and it's about what Sharmin was bringing up about Turkey, is that Turkey is at this point also trying to control Tisrin Dam in the north of Syria, east of Aleppo. This is where heavy clashes are going on between the Syrian National Army, which is backed by Turkey, with literal support from the Turkish army, air support, cross-border attacks on Kurdish forces, on the Syrian Democratic Forces. The Turkey wants to. Today, the foreign minister says they are about to. The eradication of the Kurdish threat in the south of Turkey is imminent. These are his words, right? And in the face of this threat, we have seen the U.S. mobilize heavy reinforcements to the city of Kobani, Ain al Arab, in the north of Syria, and locals say that the U.S. is actually going to build a new military base there to help the SDF. So yeah, like all of a sudden, it's like it's a free for all. This is what we're seeing in Syria. It is a literal free for all. Grab what you can while you can.
Of course, that's what happens, in regime change situations. And, I don't think the old world in which the British and the Americans waltzed into a country after regime changing it and set up constructs, right? Like artificial situations where there was governance by a select group of people over population that maybe thought otherwise, and, threw money at it so that people would just be happy for a while before they realized, those like Hollywood towns, and like the Wild West where you can see the saloon front and right, but there's nothing behind it, right, except wooden things propping up. Like that's how I see a lot of these rushed efforts to prop up failed states. They're failed states because they're not self-governing. They're not, there's no social contract, real social contract between people and governments, because these are artificially propped up governments. I feel like that whole scam, that whole game is falling apart because, the Americans are going hot and heavy with their allies and trying to, you know, gain control of key parts of the world. But these are false constructs. They won't stand the test of time. And as American power projection disappears or lessens, the dollar, for instance, starts to not be the currency used in all transactions, et cetera, as we've been seeing, they're just not going to be able to prop up their false constructs. I think that's the case with Syria as well. I do on your issue of the Druze. I just want to mention that the Cradle has a correspondent who's been in Syria for a few weeks now and is going to be heading into Druze areas imminently to interview. Now, Suwaida, the governorate of Suwaida in the south of Syria, is very different from the experience of the governorate of Quneitra in the south of Syria, Quneitra abutting the Israeli-occupied Golan Heights, of course. The Druze in Quneitra absolutely hate Israel. Israel supported Al-Qaeda forces in multiple attempts to invade and occupy Quneitra towns and villages, and they were brutal. In Suwaida, when I visited the governorate well into the war, honestly, it was the one governorate I visited where it didn't even seem like there was war, there was any sign of war. It literally was so well preserved, during the war. And so their experience and their alliances and allegiances may be quite different from what the Druze of Quneitra experience. The Druze of Quneitra may go into resistance against Israel, whereas the Druze of Suwaida, not necessarily. It bears mentioning that when I was in Suwaida, I actually met with a number of Druze from that governorate who were in the Syrian army and very much supported, the Syrian state. I met with Druze leaders who were so-so. They were going to do what benefited their community. There's a huge array of views that evolved around during at least 8-9 years of the Syrian conflict. And now there's a new situation in the south. The Israelis obviously have a very, very complicit Druze population that are more Israeli than the Israelis themselves. There will be many attempts to have the Israeli Druze launch outreach programs to the Druze in Syria, and because there are families, right, that are divided in the Golan Heights, Druze on one side occupied by Israel, Druze on the other side who absolutely hate Israel, right? So that is just another of the many, many things that we're going to have to watch evolve, and we really don't know where it's going to go. But look out for our viewers, look out for our coverage from our correspondent on the Druze in Syria in the weeks ahead.
So another thing that's been happening in Syria, it's these attacks on the so-called military council. I forget the name that HTS gave their soldiers. Now they have an official name, by the remnants of the Syrian Arab Army, right? What the Western media likes to call the Sadist militias. In any case, we have been seeing these escalate, right? In the province of Homs at this point, the new administration, I guess, they implemented a sort of a cleanse, right? They are looking for these rebel elements, although I guess they were the rebels, right? This is a very confusing. If you go by Western media, all of this is a very, very confusing terminology. But Karim, what do you know about this? And more than that, what do you think? Do you think we can see some form of resistance groups rise out of Syria? Because I think this is something that Iranian leaders have said, that a resistance is going to develop in Syria, etc. Now we're seeing these attacks, and we're seeing the cleanse, the purge that the HTS is looking to do. Is there any hope to this, or are these just kind of like the last, again, remnants of what used to be the Syrian army?
Can I just say something before
Go
Karim,
ahead.
you go on? This is like not the first time we've said on this podcast that Iranians have said there's going to be resistance in Syria. This is an analysis, okay, that anyone could have made. The fact that we keep saying, it was said by an Iranian almost suggests to our viewers and anyone reading this information that the Iranians would therefore be behind it. I don't think that's the case at all. In fact, there are Alawi groups in the north, in the west of Syria, who have gone out of their way to say, we're going to resist this. It's nothing to do with Iran. We have no connections with Iran. We don't even agree with Iran. We don't want people to have us co-opted, even in narrative, by Iran, because that's just not the case. And, and some of these groups are very disappointed in Iran. So this is not, when Iran says this is just an analysis, because you can see Kurdish groups rebelling, you can see Christian groups rebelling, you can see Alawi and Shia groups rebelling. You can, by the way, see Sunni, all right, the majority Sunni rebelling. Don't forget Homs, where we started to see some resistance, is the heart of where the so-called insurgency in Syria in 2011 kicked off in Daraa. But Homs, within no time, became the heart of the revolution, okay? So for resistance to be happening in Homs is a really big deal. And, we've been hearing reports, and I think we have a reporter looking into this now. We'll see if we get anything out of it. But that Damascene Sunni are really opposed to the government. These are not so-called Assadists. They, there is a cultural bias that the educated Damascus, capital city dwellers have against the rural Idlibis, okay? And they view these guys, one and all, to be Idlibis, all right? So it's like it's a classist thing. It's a whatever. So even the majority Sunni in Damascus are not pleased with the state of affairs, unless they're hardcore Islamists. And then within these groups, don't forget 35 or 37 groups that launched the operation. There are disagreements. So of course there's going to be resistance, and of course there's nothing to do with Iran. Go ahead, Karim.
Okay, first I want to say, when they say the remnants of the Syrian army, I think it's the same when the United States says that the Ansarullah government is a Houthi-backed Iranian militia. It's just a narrative to portray for the people that nobody will resist the new government. except if they were an Assadist or they were the previous regime, because they don't want to tell the people why these people are resisting the new government because of all the atrocities and the killings and the beheading they did for the previous years. And the previous years are not long ago. And we're not talking about a party that like ruled for 80 years, and we're talking about what the ancestors did. We are talking about people that are currently in the government and currently meeting officials outside. These people committed crimes. So of course, people don't want them to come and rule them. Yes.
The videos of the justice minister, right? The videos that surfaced a couple of days ago.
Yeah, there's many of them, and of course, in the army, we know now that there's people. We talked about it previously. There's people from China's Uyghur. There's people from Jordan. There's people from all over the world, and they are inside the army. That's insane. So I was saying, and for instance, people to understand in Syria, we have the Syrian coast, and the majority are not Sunnis. So all of these people are afraid, and they will start resisting these groups. And of course, in the south, Shami was talking about the Druze community in the south, and we have the Kurdish groups in the east. And Syria is one of the oldest countries in the world, and Damascus is one of the oldest cities in the world, and all of like if we can say religions and of also like sects of religions occurred during يعني, during the lifetime of Syria. And we have like this mountain is Christian, this mountain is Alawi, this mountain is whatever. So all of these people don't feel comfortable with the new government because they know what they will do. And the government didn't lie. They said we will hunt people that supported the regime. They said it. And they said also we will hunt the journalists that supported the regime. And they said the only media that people will see in Syria are the journalists that defected from the regime in 2011. And even if people defected later on, they will not listen to them. So that's what's happening in Syria. And I think it's wrong to say these are remnants of the Syrian army. And that's what the narrative that the West and Al Jazeera are pushing. And I don't understand, or I didn't understand when Iran said there will be resistance in Syria. I don't know if there will be, they meant resisting the regime or resisting Israel. It's not clear for me.
Yeah.
I think currently it's very difficult for the Syrians to resist Israel because you have Israel. If you want to resist Israel in Syria, you have two enemies. You have the new government and you have the Israelis. Both will not allow you to resist. So I think currently it will be very difficult. Sorry, I just want to clarify something for other people that lives in other nations. For instance, in Europe or even in Egypt. Unfortunately, or fortunately, it depends on the situation. Countries such as Lebanon, Syria, and and Iraq, the population is heavily armed. Yani you don't need to be like in an army to have a weapon to fight. Any like people that live in rural areas, they will have RPGs, they will have like Kalashnikovs, they will have
Grenades,
small
etc.
arms or even mid arms. So you don't need to be in an army to fight and to hold weapons. It's everywhere in this, especially in these three countries.
I almost think that, whatever the Western narrative will be, and as you said, Karim, rightfully, they will try to say, oh, these are Iran-backed groups or these are Assadist groups. The fact is, in these towns and villages and city in Syria, Syrian citizens are going to know the real story, okay? They're not going to be looking to Western media to get the story clarified for them because they're the ones feeling the anxiety. They're the ones feeling the pressure. They know in Homs, these are Sunni who are, are fighting against, who've launched some kind of rebellion or resistance against the authorities. The ones in Tartus or Latakia know that this is, from watching videos of Alawi men being ordered to bark like dogs or bray like donkeys, okay, to humiliate them and emasculate them by these Islamist, militants. I mean, one of the things is the amount of videos we're now seeing of efforts to humiliate, torture, beat up, and kill regular citizens by militant groups affiliated with the government are so numerous compared to any videos you saw in 2011 of the Assad government forces beating up, hurting, torturing, or killing Syrians. You always heard those stories, you never saw them. You didn't have video clips like this. Now every day we have video clips of the new Syrian regime,
Government
government, whatever, but groups affiliated with them, absolutely, uh, you know,
harassing, yeah, violating people's rights, etc.
I mean, killing, executing,
Exactly.
point blank. So I don't know. Like, is Jolani and co hanging their hats on their Western and Arab relations, like sugarcoating everything and smoothing the way for them forward? Because that's not going to be the experience of the average Syrian citizen. That's who they have to govern. Not the American Secretary of State, the Saudi foreign minister, the Iraqi intelligence, the Turkish intelligence minister. Those are not their constituents.
Exactly. And, for example, the one thing that has already been implemented is the change in the curriculum, right? Like this was a big story last week that, as many things coming out of Syria, Western media completely ignored.
Yeah.
That all of a sudden you have an Islamist school curriculum in what used to be a secular educational system. You have, Shara saying it's going to take 4 years to have elections, it's going to take 3 years to draft a constitution. He feels pretty bulletproof, right, in his fancy
Yeah.
Armani suit. This man, he feels at the top of the world right now. But let's move on to Lebanon, where, first of all, Israeli violations have just continued completely unabated. I think at this point, the Cradle reported last week is more than 1,000 violations since the, quote unquote ceasefire was implemented. Now, Israel is signaling, well, I don't know if signaling is the correct word. I think they're threatening, really, that they will not withdraw from Lebanon at the end of the 60-day ceasefire, and they might actually, unilaterally extend the terms of their deployment in the south of Lebanon for at least another 30 days. We know that when Israel says gives a time frame, it's usually you know complete bullcrap, so to speak. It's just whatever for the sound bites. What they really mean is that we're here to stay, right? They say Hezbollah has not moved back from the Litani River. They say the Lebanese army is not deploying to the degree that they should have already been deployed. Although the Lebanese army is coming under constant attack by the Israeli army, they have already recorded several casualties. As this ceasefire, named ceasefire, is looking towards collapse, essentially, Lebanon is 3 days away from elections, from a parliamentary session. I'm sorry, it's not elections; it's a parliamentary session in which parliament is expected to elect a new president. Right after how long has it been? Like almost 2.5 years since elections were held. Right. Finally, supposedly, and obviously, there's the usual suspects are being named. On the one hand, you have Suleiman Frangieh, the Marada leader, who is a Hezbollah and the resistance bloc's preferred candidate. On the other hand, you have Joseph Aoun, commander of the Lebanese armed forces, someone of a known quantity to our longtime readers, who has the support of essentially the what is known as the quintet, right, of Qatar or Saudi Arabia, France, the United States, etc. They are all pushing. They want Joseph Aoun as president. So, from what I hear from people I know, from friends, family, colleagues in Lebanon, nobody really expects an election to happen come this Thursday. And would it even make a difference, really, when you have, Israel saying we're just gonna stay here for as long as we want?
Well, we're doing something interesting this week in preparation for the Thursday vote. Um, we've decided to ask the candidates and their staff, their senior staff, what exactly the candidates intend to do for Lebanon. Because if you notice, in all the deliberation over years over president, we don't actually know what any of these candidates stand for. We
They have no
only know
platform.
this is Iran backed, this is France backed, this is Saudi backed, this is an American backed candidate. There's no discussion about what that that presidential candidate will do for Lebanon's collapsed financial system, what it will do for its economy, what its geopolitical focus will be, okay, what it's going to do to address the massive refugee problem in the country, okay, what Lebanon is going to do, what the presidential candidate will do to rebuild homes in the south that have been destroyed by Israel. That should be a huge consideration, okay? Because the Israelis are now trying to get the Americans to come in this early on the game and say, we're not going to provide reconstruction funds, okay, unless we have proof that Hezbollah is north of the Litani River. You know, it's kind of like, we believe that Iran is working on nuclear weapons, zero proof, but the allegation is there and it's unprovable. You know, there's nothing you can do that can prove it. So, you know, to basically make the South unlivable, in addition to Israel bulldozing over homes and villages they weren't able to reach during the battles, but have destroyed during the ceasefire, right? The 1,000 violations, Esteban, you spoke about. So we're going to do a piece to try to figure out what these candidates actually stand for and if they have any agenda and if they have any blueprint fixing Lebanon. Let's see the reaction we get from that. The other important thing to note is the other important thing to note is Amos Hochstein, the American/Israeli envoy, is in Lebanon today, January 6th, to head up the committee meeting, you know, the ceasefire oversight committee meeting that's run by the Americans and the French.
Yeah.
Including
bringing
the
messages
Lebanese
along,
army,
too.
the Israelis, and I guess UNIFIL too. So, as we reported last week in an exclusive, at some point, the Israelis in the last meeting were not agreeing that the ceasefire stipulated that they have to leave within 60 days. They were not agreeing that they had violated anything. They all their drone activities, they believe, were not violations. They were defensive postures, and so they would not stop the violation of Lebanon's airspace. It just went on and on until the Lebanese general just walked out, and the American general had to pull him back in. And then in a future meeting that the Israelis were excluded from, where the Americans, the Lebanese army, and the caretaker Lebanese Prime Minister Najib Mikati attended, the Americans conceded that Israel was violating the ceasefire and said that when Amos Hochstein comes to Lebanon on January 6th, we will have clarifications on all these points that you legitimately bring up, which means getting the Israelis to agree to their position, which is something like that just doesn't happen. The Israelis just constantly move goalposts. So I think what we hear from today, if we're even allowed to hear anything from that important meeting, is going to be very interesting. You know, so that's where we are here. But at the same time, Hezbollah has now announced that its capabilities are restored as Israel threatens to collapse the ceasefire, right? And its Secretary General Naim Qassem has said, at this rate, though, the Israeli violations are wearing down Hezbollah's patience, and Hezbollah may run out of that patience before the end of the 60-day ceasefire period. We have about 20 days left in the ceasefire period. I don't think Hezbollah is going to initiate anything, but for sure, if Israel actually thinks it stay in Lebanon, in Lebanese territories, continue the destruction of Lebanese towns and villages in the next 20 days with even more firepower, then we're going to see the war back on at the end of those 20 days. And of course, the Israeli defense minister, Israel Katz, has walked in and said that it's likely that Israel would be forced to act to return, to ensure the safe return of its settlers to the north. What's crazy here is that the IDF is basically setting up things in the south, okay, physically and in talks, to force a several kilometer buffer zone in South Lebanon through negotiations after a ceasefire deal was reached, okay? So they want to negotiate a surrender of Lebanese land during peacetime, okay? And secure what they couldn't during battle. Sorry, that's just insane. Let's see. Israel's occupying the South Lebanon. Israel's occupying Gaza. It's occupying the West Bank. It's occupying Syria. Can Israel sustain this constant occupation everywhere, these violations everywhere? We've yet to see.
Yeah. What do you
Can
think,
he?
Karim?
Well, we in 3 days we are يعني currently we are living in the consequences of this week deal that will be upon these 60 days. I think it's very stupid. I said it in the day one, and I will say it. It's very stupid. If we are a real country, the guy who like accepted the 60 days, even if they were from Hezbollah, they should be prosecuted. This is a very stupid deal. 60 days. Within these 60 days, we should elect a president, and within these 60 days, Trump will be in power. I don't know why they agreed on 60 days, not on like 45 days or 40 days. Uh, at this point, I think if the war persisted, it's better for the Lebanese people than what we are living now, because Israel reached places that it couldn't reach previously, and it didn't have the free of motion to like detonate all these buildings that they did. This is a point I wanted to clarify. And a second point, I just want to tell our viewers the president in Lebanon is nothing. Nobody cares about the president. But what we are living here now is a very critical situation. Why? Because the West and the Gulf people, they have no problem with On, which is the head of the army. And this will create a very important situation in Lebanon. This means that also the Lebanese people or the Lebanese whatever government or these people that rule us, they should elect a new head of al army. I don't know if this is the thing. They will push Joseph on, and he will be the president, and he has zero power. President, nobody knows the president in Lebanon. We're not like the United States. Yani, we're more like Iraq. The prime minister is everything. So if this creates the vacuum, and they can put a head of an army who's like friendly with Israel and more friendly with the West, as Joseph on, this will create a very difficult situation for every people who support the resistance, or and also for Hezbollah. And of course, the next step is they want to get a prime minister, the real ruler of Lebanon. I don't know Joseph Hon who will
Because
choose.
that's what I was
Again,
going to ask you. Sorry, Karim. The president is the one who names, right? Nominates the prime minister,
and
and
that's
I
in
think
the
the head of the army
constitution.
too.
But this never happened in Lebanon. Usually, the same people that elected the president, before they elect him, they sit together, which is currently in Lebanon, like they are 4 or 5 people only. One should be Druze, one is Sunni. I don't if they will accept to listen to the Shias what they want, because currently they can like just put them aside, because although the highest population in Lebanon is Shias and then Sunnis, but the head of like high ranked positions, they are equal. And if you are and if your sect is like 1 million, and you have for instance the rules they are 200,000, you are equal in the country. So that's not to make it more complicated for our viewers. So what happens that these people, the same people, they will choose the prime minister, and this is literally what happens. And then they will go to the president and tell them, look, we agreed on this name, and then he will call this name, and this name, of course, will agree, and he will make a new government. So this is the situation that we are waiting in these 3 days. So if they agree uh, on Joseph Hon, who's currently the head of the army, they have to like change a letter or a sentence in the constitution, because they can do this in the constitution, but they will change it. We don't care about our
What
constitution.
sect is the armed forces commander supposed to be from? You know, we know that Lebanon has this confessional system that is like every sect gets a specific position in government. The Lebanese, the head of the army is supposed to be Christian.
Yeah, he should be a Christian. The prime minister should
Wait,
be a Sunni,
is that
and
by
the
wait,
leader of
is
the
that by
parliament.
constitution that the head
Yes,
of the
yes,
that the head of the army has to be a Christian? Or
yes.
is it
The president.
practice?
No, no.
The head of the president, yes, but the head of the army, is that constitutional? I don't know if that's just not by practice.
No, I think it's
Esteban, look it up.
It's
I trust
constitution.
Karim. I trust Karim's word, but let me double check. Just
Yeah, and of course we have the 5 heads of the army. Of course, also 2 should be Christians, 2 should be Muslims, and 1 should be Durzi. So it's complicated. So that's what we are waiting. So I'm waiting which prime minister and which new head of the army will be. Personally, I don't care about the president. I never did, and I will never will, except if the people elect their president in Lebanon, and he should have power. Currently, we don't do both. He doesn't have power, and we don't elect him. So I back to the 60 days. I don't know if that's their plan, the Israelis and the West, to get a new head of army who can practice what they wanted to practice in south of Lebanon.
So here, something interesting, because I think the answer to the question is somewhere in between, apparently, because it refers to Lebanon's constitutional practices. The Lebanese Armed Forces commander should be a Maronite Christian, but this is based on the unwritten National Pact of 1943, and then it talks about that is not explicitly stated in the written constitution, but rather in customary practice and the Taif Agreement, which formalized many of these confessional arrangements. So yeah, I think it's just common that it would be a Christian Maronite. It would be interesting if all of a sudden they picked a different sect, because I don't think Lebanon is not really a country of change. Sadly, right? It's not a country where change is
Yeah,
welcome.
I personally don't know why they didn't wait to choose a president after the ceasefire, because frankly speaking, one of the main components of the ceasefire oversight organization is the Lebanese Armed Forces. Joseph Aoun is the commander in chief of the Lebanese Armed Forces. If they fail to uphold the ceasefire, if the enemy fails to uphold the ceasefire agreement, if one Israeli troop exists on Lebanese territory in the next 20 days, after the next 20 days is up, then the Lebanese armed forces commander should not be president of this country, because he could not fulfill the most basic security requirement of this country. It's obscene to me that you would reward this patsy, okay, who just took violation after violation, who showed that there is no one other than the Lebanese resistance that can defend this country, that the Lebanese army is ineffective with him as the commander, and he deserves to be president. Now, Karim, I agree with you. Like, Lebanon doesn't change whether there is a president or not. So, but this is a very important thing, because what Western states seek and why they fight so heavily to have their candidate become president, even though it's not like the super role in Lebanon, is the tiny sliver of legitimacy it gives to that person to carry out things, legally binding things in Lebanon. Okay? That's why they want that person in. They want to stack the deck, as many people who they can pull over to their side to put things, okay, to create legal situations, binding situations. They want to do that. You cannot underestimate, like, even look at in Yemen, there's no Yemeni government other than the one in Sana'a, and then the various the council in Aden, right?
Two councils that have the same president. It's also, I
it's
urge the people
insane.
to read about
But
it.
the UN recognizes that shit show in the South, the Saudi-backed, Emirati-backed, American-backed,
Saudi appointed council.
UK-backed, because nobody recognized the Sana'a, the government's takeover, and the government in Sana'a moved south to re-establish itself in Aden. And even though it's a complete shit show by selected people, appointed people by foreign governments and not by Yemenis, it is the government that left Sana'a. And so that sliver of legitimacy it maintains because of its provenance is all these people need, in order to enact laws and push forth agendas legally on the international scene. That's why they want their guy to be in the presidency. So it's not unimportant, is all I'm saying to you.
But they will succeed. This is also the consequences of the soft power that Hezbollah practiced since like 20 years.
So
Too
Yeah,
nice for their own good.
said we don't have a president for more than 2 years. And 2 years ago, Hezbollah had, they reached the peak in their influence and in their military power and political and media, and they failed to elect or to convince others or to, how can I say it? They failed to exert pressure on others, which
or to gain influence, I guess, right? Like
legitimacy, yeah.
politically.
If you have most of the people are with you, you can elect a president. But this was not a case in Lebanon. They used soft power with people that are aligned historically with Israel, and they listened to them. And we sat 2 years without a president. Now Hezbollah are very weak, and I think they will accept anything. And of course, we will yet to see the consequence of this stupid 60 days.
The Lebanese resistance is far too well behaved for its own good. I have to say, like, shut up. If you're resistance, sorry, what rules and laws are you following? Why? Why are
And the
you
other,
following the rules and laws to the letter of the law when your adversaries, the states, okay, themselves violate law all the time? I
and
don't
that
understand
actually
this.
that actually brings us to the last topic that we wanted to discuss before wrapping up for this week, and that is Yemen.
Oh, I
I
want to
guess
do a little segue before that, Esteban, please,
you want to do a
please.
segue? Yeah, go
A
ahead.
little segue because let's talk about the Israeli withdrawal from Lebanon. Let's talk about the problems Israel's having with its settlers, okay? Because there's been a up of activities, all right? So you have Hamas.
Yeah,
Israel
firing
claims
more than
Hamas
20
is
rockets. Yeah.
revitalized. Hamas is sending rockets into Sderot, that vicious settlement who sits and eats popcorn on lawn chairs while Gaza's being bombed. They're complaining like crazy. Israel is now being forced to bribe settlers, each settler to the amount of over $4,000 if they'll just return to their homes in the north. And the settlers are saying, "No way, Jose! You have not eliminated the 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 threat of war and conflict." And it just goes to show, like, people are like, "Oh, Hezbollah is defeated," etc. No, they accomplished their war goals. Israel has not accomplished its war goals. Okay, its war goal was not to create a buffer in Lebanon and destroy all the towns and villages and homes in southern Lebanon. It was to get its settlers back to the north. All right, keep that in mind when you keep talking about wins on one side and losses on the others. Hezbollah has attained its war goal even after the ceasefire. Israel has not. Sderot residents who are in the Gaza envelope are angry over, they're crazies, those guys. They actually returned to Gaza during the state of war, but they're reporting that the reality is unbearable, and they're like suspending schools and studies and stuff. They can't go on, they're saying. Then at the same time, just in the last 2 days or so, 3 Israeli settlers were killed and many others injured in a shooting operation in the West Bank near the Kedumim settlement. Okay. And this has opened up a whole other can of worms. You have, of course, the extremist ministers of the current Israeli government, Smotrich and Ben Gvir, absolutely going apeshit over this. Ben Gvir, who is saying that the PA is a supporter of terrorism. The PA, the Palestinian Authority, who basically acts as Israeli enforcers in the West Bank, killing Palestinian resistance fighters. Okay, they and torturing them and imprisoning them. They're being called by They're being called by Israel's national security minister Itamar Ben Gvir as terrorists. Okay, and he is saying that the Israeli cabinet has to suspend all its relations with the Palestinian Authority. He is now, based on this one incident, now saying Jews in the West Bank have to set up roadblocks everywhere. Roads must be closed everywhere. And he says this: the settlers, okay, the Jewish settlers' right to life is superior to the freedom of movement to the Palestinian Authority residents. He doesn't even call them Palestinians.
Yeah.
Okay.
He said this last
And
year
he
as
said,
well, I remember. This is the
sorry.
s this is the second time he says it. I remember he said it last year about the lives,
Yeah.
like, that their
Yeah.
lives are much more important, yeah.
Yeah, and then he further threatens, imploring his fellow cabinet members, to restrict the movement of all Palestinians in the West Bank, and they have Jews only roads there, but taking that to the nth level now. He then turns to threaten his fellow cabinet members, saying, if any one of y'all accept the end of the war of the Gaza, you will be facing a war in the West Bank. And of course, Ben Gvir was at the forefront with Smotrich and others to arm the settlers, okay, Jewish settlers in the West Bank, and train them, okay, during the interim 16 months since October 7th. So he's looking for a war in the West Bank, which will be not anything like the one in Gaza, because there are multiple parties, including Israel's strongest allies in the Gulf, Persian Gulf countries, who have their entire legitimacy is premised on this old notion of no, we support a Palestinian state. And if the West Bank goes, they can't support Israel in any shape or form. So we have to see that what's coming now in the West Bank, these shooting operations, etc., now shooting at settlers. They're trying to impose curfews at like 7 p.m. or so in the West Bank so settlers can come out and rampage. Jewish settlers would not have a curfew. Only Arab Christians and Muslims would be under curfew in the West Bank. So Jewish settlers can set fire to homes, to cars, to businesses, etc. That is the state of affairs we're moving into in the West Bank.
Yeah, I mean, the West Bank is completely deteriorating. It's completely, I feel like with Trump coming in, we've said this before, we've talked about it for a bit now, about the situation with Trump, right? And his promise, I guess, to the Miriam Adelson and the donations, etc. But
Annexation of the West Bank.
yeah, so I think it's very interesting, Sharmi, what you're saying, about how like things are kind of closing in around them, because it allows us to come full circle from the beginning of this episode, right? We're talking about, is Israel going to be the last place where, the real safety, I guess, for Jews or persecution from a committing genocide? And now Israel is also again going constant under attack, and that is actually the last topic that we wanted to discuss, which was Yemen, the continued attacks by Yemen against Israel that are hitting Israel, right? Not all of the projectiles, not all of their drones are being shot down. We already know that the Iron Dome has, far from 100% accuracy rate to shoot down incoming projectiles, and Yemen keeps using hypersonic ballistic missiles. We see Yemenis marching by the hundreds of thousands every Friday, essentially asking for escalation.
Yeah.
Yemenis are at this point, like you said, a few minutes ago, Sharmina, Hezbollah or the Lebanese resistance is too well behaved. Yemen is proving to be a complete opposite of that. Yemen is, ride or die, so to speak, I guess, when it comes to Palestine in particular. At the same time, the attacks from the US, the UK, and Israel have also intensified, with reports saying that Washington may be preparing bigger action against Yemen. A few
Yeah.
weeks ago, there was this very interesting thing happening, which the Pentagon, from Tuesday to Wednesday, right, from overnight, they said we actually have more troops in Syria than we had already disclosed, right? It was like if you fed a gremlin overnight, they just doubled, right? Like all of a sudden, we just have double the number of troops in Syria. In Yemen, we know that there's movements. We know that there's attempts, right, at recreating, I guess, the situation or what happened in Syria, or maybe even, I don't know, like, can we look at an invasion? Can we look at the United States marching troops into Yemen, or to Saudi Arabia reigniting the war? What is the hope here? Because Yemen,
Well,
what they're asking is for an end to the genocide.
that would go against everything President-elect Donald Trump has promised to his constituents. We're not going to start wars. We're going to do like money economy deals, right? No, I mean, U.S. troops in there, no. Can the Americans pressure the Emiratis and the Saudis to reignite the war on Yemen? I don't know. I think MBS, Mohammed bin Salman, the Saudi crown prince, has been pretty burned on that. And he really has other fish to fry, which is his economy, development, change in Saudi Arabia. He is not keen to reignite the Yemen war. On the other hand, the UAE has different considerations. They're very, very close to the Israelis. They work in lockstep on a number of geopolitical and geostrategic issues in the region, including waterways, right? It's very important for the Emiratis, part of why they're trying to take over, colonize, if you will, the south of Yemen, is because that's where Yemen's ports and waterways are located. It is in lockstep with the Israelis to stop the Houthis from being able to impede these waterways, you know, and Israel and the UAE are very, very keen on setting up military bases in the Horn of Africa
in
to
Somaliland.
to contain, yeah, in Somaliland. The UAE has one in Djibouti now, but that's being contested in courts. I think Djibouti wants the UAE out. So you can look to the Americans, the Israelis, and the Emiratis recognizing Somaliland and setting up military bases there again to control those essential waterways. So the UAE might be a very close Israeli partner in trying to launch new operations in Yemen. But the Yemenis are not sitting idle either. We have a report at the Cradle that the Yemeni security forces just announced the disruption of espionage activities in the country orchestrated by the British MI6 and Saudi intelligence agencies. Just in December, they apprehended members of a British-led spy network working in coordination with Saudi intelligence. These spies and agents were reportedly tasked with gathering intelligence on Yemen's strategic capabilities, including obviously missile sites, drone operations, and the movements of key leaders. Now, this is interesting that they say that because just after Yemen or Ansar Allah launched their last hits on Israel, there were reports that Ansar Allah has issued orders to its top people to break their patterns, their habits, and their locations entirely, because it's possible that they'd stumbled across this intelligence ring right before that, and they knew what these guys are like digging up. And of course, we know that Israel is absolutely insane in its violations of international law and its assassination strategy, right? Killing heads of its adversaries left, right, and center. Obviously, the Yemenis are going to take note of that. So they busted this ring that we're trying to identify missile sites of the Yemenis, which is going to be like the key thing that everyone's looking for. In fact, Israelis and the Americans and the British hit civilian infrastructure. You know, it's because they don't know where the missiles are hidden.
Yeah.
It's obvious.
They keep
Otherwise,
hitting
they'd
the
be
same
hitting
places.
missile sites, right?
Yeah.
So I think the Yemenis have probably learned from their other partners in the resistance axis's mistakes and are, trying to mitigate those by changing many things. So Yemen, the fight is on with Yemen. Who will launch a war in Yemen and how will be interesting to watch. Again, one of those many things up in the air. But Karim, this is your area, so definitely want to hear from you on that. Like, do you think the Yemenis have an advantage going in, having watched what's happened to its various Axis partners?
Well, I think, of course, we said it maybe last year in our early podcast. I said that the United States and the whole of Europe and Israel can't do anything to Yemen. They can't stop them because the structure and how Ansar Allah came to power and how they started to build their military power. They started from day one. They were under attacks. Yeah, they never had like
Yeah.
Syria infrastructure.
Yeah.
Who everybody knows them. Everything is underground, and they have videos from 2017. We can see that huge infrastructure underground on all their missiles. So from this side, they are safe. And regarding assassinations, it's very difficult for anybody to assassinate leaders of Ansarullah. And if they did, they already lost their ultimate leader, who was Salman. Saudi Arabia already assassinated him. Of course, we know currently Mohammed al-Houthi. He came to power because also the Saudis and their supporters in Yemen assassinated his brother. So they are safe from this. And of course, Israel is very far if they want to assassinate. So, but the only thing that I wanted to comment is what Sharmi said. That we will see if they learned from their allies. I think if they learn from their allies, I think this year they should launch an attack on Adan and on other parties and take over Yemen. Sitting like this and waiting, unfortunately, I think after nobody knows after one decade what will happen. The same happened in Syria in 2014 and 15 and 16 and 17 after the Syrian army pushed back the terrorists or the extremists. Nobody thought that they can have power again. But unfortunately, we saw what happened at the end of this year. So I think the best way for Ansarullah to maintain their rule and their power and to keep their gains that they gained during this long-range war between them and between Israel, they should attack and should launch operations in Adan and in Hudaydah now.
So I want to ask you a question about that. I mean, is that your sort of like on your wish list, or are you seeing any indication that that is what Ansarullah is considering
There is
even
not,
now? Because
there's
what
not indications.
Okay.
I was just commenting on what you said. They should learn. If Hezbollah attacked the Lebanese Forces Party, even not by weapons. At, in politics, we wouldn't reach where we are here if the Syrian army didn't wait and keep these people in Idlib without firing any weapons or exerting pressure on them. They wouldn't enter Damascus, and so on and so on. So I think that's what Ansarullah should do. I think they are as a entity or as a government, they are safe from the United States and Israel, but they're not safe from internal conflict, and they should initiate these
So-
attacks because the acts of resistance, as I said, they are only reacting and they're not acting, and they should act before they do anything for them.
Okay, but Karim, just want to mention something that we have seen during the Gaza war, especially when Yemen started, stood up and started attacking ships headed for Israel, etc. That the Yemeni populations in the south, the Emirati and Saudi-controlled areas, were like chanting in favor of Ansarullah because it seems to be an entirely Yemen phenomena to be so united and so vested in the Palestine issue and being so anti-Zionist. Like the only Arab country we see like this. And so all of a sudden you had commanders and senior people from the military organizations that are backed by the UAE and Saudi defecting to Sana'a. Now, part of that is also because Sana'a, the Ansarullah-run areas of Yemen, are where the economy is stable, and it is not stable in the Saudi Emirati-run area of Yemen.
Yes,
So there's
exactly.
partly that, but partly great pride at what Ansarullah was
Yes.
doing on behalf of Gaza and against Israel. So would this at all be the right time for Ansarullah to
Of course, it's the
no,
right time.
a war against the Yemenis who in a way kind of have support for Ansarallah's actions? Why attack them now and make them instant enemies? And give the Saudis, Emiratis, Americans,
I guess.
Israeli an excuse to just because why?
Not you.
Wait. There was a while at the Cradle where like, how come Ansarullah isn't making headway in Maghreb? How come they're not in all these areas, right? Handarat? What's the
Hadramaut?
Hadramaut?
Hadramaut is near Sultanate Oman. It's far.
Okay. So how come they're not making inroads? How come it's sort of like become stagnant? It didn't seem like Ansarullah had the capabilities to push any further. Why would they
Exactly.
push further now? Why would
Because
they?
now they are strong. You should attack when you are strong. Now they are strong. They should attack. Hezbollah was strong before they didn't attack. Syria was strong before it didn't attack, and they
Yeah.
attacked it. You should attack when you are strong,
Interesting.
Sharmeen.
No,
And
it's
now
interesting. Yeah.
they are strong. Not
So I don't
to-
want to
only
make
the
this
people
episode
that are getting direct money from UAE and Saudi Arabia. And previously, when we talked about Hudaydah, the war was active. Saudi warplanes were in the skies. Now there is no Saudi planes or UAE planes. Now we have just mercenaries having light weapons on the border. And I don't think, especially that Saudi Arabia, they are like reaching ecstasy till now. They did reach the ecstasy that they were elected to host the World Cup.
the FIFA.
From your mouth to Sana's ears, Karim. That would be quite a turn of events in the region. Really, it would.
You know what?
I don't think they will risk it first because Sana'a already did a very big scene 2 years ago when Saudi Arabia, they were very happy hosting Formula One, and everybody saw the smokes behind the
With
cars.
the Aramco
They don't
tanks
want to
on
risk
fire,
it.
on fire.
And as I said, we should change our mentality. You should attack when you are strong. You should not rest when you are strong. You should rest and think when you are weak.
So that's very interesting, because what would happen essentially would be the reverse of what happened in Syria, right? Like it would be
100%.
exactly all of a sudden the reverse. And the one thing I just wanted to mention is that in Yemen, you do have Al Qaeda elements, right? You also have Al Qaeda in the Arabian Peninsula. So,
Yeah, but currently they are less powerful than before, especially after when Mohammed bin Salman came to power. One of the good things that have like maybe good consequences on the region, he want to create pubs more than to create Salafis. So there's remnants of these people, but they are not currently being funded by Saudi Arabia like previously. So they are not that strong.
very interesting, very interesting. And again, maybe some Yemeni leaders will listen to this podcast and I get some ideas about how to move forward. Not that we are, obviously condoning any of these. We are simply a political analyst. And in any case, we want to thank you for joining us this week. We want to again remind you to please like, share, and subscribe to our channel, to follow us on X, on Instagram, and Telegram as well. And to please check out our Patreon, where you can become a supporter and allow us to continue doing the work that we do here at the Cradle. For the Cradle News Roundup, my name is Esteban Carrillo. I have been joined by Sharmin Narwani and Karim Shah.